afternoon portion of the implementation committee started. Let's do introductions again because we've had several new afternoon shifts in the alternatives of our implementation committee members. So Fred, do you want to remind everybody for the camera?
Fred Yeager, Department of Education.
Lee Coop, Vacaville Unified School District, representing Casbo.
Mamie Starr from San Joaquin County, representing Secessa.
Mary Morris from HMC Architects, representing American Institute of Architects.
Bill Savage, West Contra Costa Unified School District, representing Cash.
Juan Morales, representing the Office of Public School Construction.
Lisa Kaplan, AEO.
Chris Ferguson, Department of Finance.
Rob Pierce, Elk Grove Unified, representing suburban school districts.
Sean Atlow, Los Angeles Unified School District.
Richard Conrad, Division of the State Architect.
Debbie Pearson, representing Small School Districts Association.
Dennis Dunstan with Total School Solutions, representing the Council of Educational Facility Planners.
All right, I hope everybody had a good lunch, and we're going to keep it stimulating enough so that I find nobody snoring on the dais. So when we left, I wanted, well, hey, it might be me if you guys don't, rile it up a little bit. So I want to start with understanding that as if we are directed to bring this to the State Allocation Board for the April meeting, for the April SAB meeting, that attachment that is included in pages 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are OPSC's proposal to the changes. So is what I want to start. I don't want to talk about cash or chips or anything else. Let's pretend there is no other option but this. I want to talk about, is everybody okay with the language here? If not, I need suggested changes because these are going to come. So let's remember what IMP used to be, as we would suggestively draft things for proposal as it goes forward. So if you have changes to the regs here, not adding on chips or cash.
So you mean that this would be one option? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So we can talk about other options in a minute.
In a minute. This is just option and to provide feedback to OPSC of suggested changes with this option if there are concerns with that. And Dennis, you were the first to kind of mention it. Yes, Brian.
Before we start, I want to clarify just a couple of quick points.
Okay.
I was noticing when I was reading these earlier, I think our point totals, I'm going to have to reevaluate those, and I can send an email out to everybody, but I think they're off by 1 or 2 points right now because we were kind of tinkering with them at the last minute. I'm not sure if they add up correctly. Which is a minor point. We can notify everybody. Mm-hmm. The other thing is
Okay.
I think Teresa can actually clarify.
Okay.
Find it. Oh, it's on.
I think it's E.
It's on page 8. Yeah. It's down there on number 4. And this is kind of a housekeeping thing for DSA. And this line that mentions May 20th gets us into some alignment problems where people are coming in to do their plans after they get a DSA stamp. And so we can get you the wording on that will help us so that they come in, they apply for structural access, fire life safety, and HPI if they're doing it, and not do it after the stamp, which has caused, we used to allow it because there was things in the pipeline we wanted to get the program going. But at this point, people know about it, and we'd like them to apply align with all the other disciplines. So
okay.
We'll get that language.
I just want to kind of read it into the record, so to speak.
Okay, and comment only on this change.
Actually, I think it's a really good idea to get that into the regulations because it has been DSA's practice now to not accept HPI review after other reviews have been completed by DSA, and so it creates confusion on the part of practitioners, so it's good to get it in there.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
All righty. Starting with Dennis, and then we'll go to Lee.
As I mentioned this morning, I'm actually opposed to any changes to the point values. I think that we should stick with what is in the original point values. The further we get away from the CHIPS criteria, I think the worse off we are. So I think I'm opposed to changing the point values. However, on page 7, if we start there looking at 3 down at the bottom, that is the percentages, I would propose that we just double those percentage increases in the grant amounts and
Okay.
follow that through on.
That's like option C or D. So,
Okay.
because your fundamental is you are opposed to any changes with point value. Okay.
But what I heard him say was that he wants to keep as close alignment as we can to the CHIPS criteria, right? Yes. And that seems, okay.
Okay, but that's just another proposal. So, Lee?
Thank you, Lisa. Just a question, I guess, for staff. I was, in reading through it, I thought it said that the prerequisites would all get points now. But there are several on the first page. I don't have page numbers, but on the very first page, and maybe you've gone over this, page 5, where it says prerequisite, but then doesn't say equals 1 point. But later on, did you already correct? Maybe you already corrected that.
Well, actually, the prerequisites that we assigned points to were ones that were above code.
Okay.
That in our criteria, there are prerequisites that were above existing code. Those are the ones that we focused on. So there's only five areas that we actually, 5 prerequisites that we actually attach points to.
So I see there's A1A,
Right.
and there's several on, I guess, 4 of them on here, or 3 of them that you wouldn't assign points to.
Right, because they don't exceed current code.
Okay. Okay.
7 points in 5 categories.
Yeah.
2 of them have 2 points.
No. 2 of them have 2 points.
Water, energy 2 points, acoustics 2 points, and then the other 3, fundamental building systems.
Materials has 2, environmental has 2, that's 2, 4. It is 7.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
There isn't any for water, I'm sorry. There's not.
Chris?
No.
Well, I just want to be on the record on our support for adding in the 2008 California Energy Code and the 2009 CHIPS criteria.
2 for energy, 2 for acoustics.
And we support Department of Finance on that.
2 in
See, there are some things we can find agreement on.
and then fundamental building systems.
So,
Just
make
above
sure that
materials,
it's on camera, because
above
remember,
enhanced
people are watching us. We got to make sure we're on mic so that we can hear. Because Dennis, your mic is not pointed towards you. That's a problem. You need to be on the record.
We're just trying to figure out where the 7 points are.
Here's the thing, somebody in the audience watching may be trying to figure that out as well.
Sure. Yeah, I can go over them again.
Comments on this now?
Let him go. Why don't you go through where the 7 prerequisites are so everybody's clear and nobody's confused.
Under the energy, 1A, 2 points for that prerequisite for minimum energy performance. The top of stamp page 6, just above the materials section, 3A, fundamental building systems testing and training is now 1 point. And then under materials, 1 and 2A are prerequisites that have 1 point each now. And then 2 points for minimum acoustical performance.
Okay. And then, Bill, I know you had...
Well, I just wanted to comment on you were asking for comments or support or not on this approach. And I think that, I think Cash could live with this in terms that I understand why OPSC did this, that it works within the existing program, and that they've tried to target it in ways that recognize where prerequisites, for example, were above the base grant. They've tried to target it in ways where we clearly have a total disconnect between what points and dollars were available before for renewable energy, for example. And even with what's being adjusted here, these dollars are nowhere near funding any significant portion of a renewable energy system at all. But I think the steps that they've taken within the context of the existing regulations, the existing program, and the way it's set up are fine. They're okay. They need to be coupled with something like the starter grant or whatever, but it seems as though they come close to meeting one of the two major concerns of the alternate proposal, which I won't talk about, to double the funding across the board, or what Dennis just said. So I think within the context of the existing program and what OPSC's world is with that, I think it's a good step, but it needs another piece to it.
So, because what I'm trying to do is take from this is that we've had an IMP discussion on this, so as the write-up comes in, I can provide input on that, and then I foresee at least 2 other options coming before that I can represent, that these were options brought up by the implementation committee, so that the board at least knew these in the write-up. So, besides the change with DSA, are there any other changes in the write-up?
Well, I just have a question on energy, E, and indoor environmental quality, D. Are those consistent with the CHIPS criteria? Those 2 additions?
Yes.
Okay.
What we did was we took the new CHIPS criteria and we incorporated what was bricks and mortar into, and worked with OPSC on those. And so everything, and I was curious on, well, I don't know if I can ask questions, but.
Yes, you can, absolutely. You are an invaluable resource.
Well, Dennis did ask, or made a comment that some of these are not CHIPS criteria, and I was just wondering which ones did you tag as those being, or do you feel that we're aligned with what is in the criteria?
No, I did not say that they weren't CHIPS criteria. I have a problem with varying from the CHIPS point system.
Oh, okay.
The criteria are all the same. It's just a matter of going further from the CHIPS point system is where I have a problem. There's too many systems out there. People get confused, and I think that the CHIPS organization has a much better background in determining what the points should be.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, Deborah?
Just a comment, and there wasn't much discussion on the acoustics. What's the level, again, that you have to have?
45 decibels, and I think a
With a reverb.
0.6 reverb, I think. Yeah.
And without tearing down the walls, can you do that in a mod?
I'm not sure personally. I don't know.
Dennis?
I can't address that.
And
I think it's tough.
it's only required in classrooms.
It really varies a lot in terms of what you're looking at and what the existing conditions are and what the shape and configuration of the classroom is. It's too hard to say yes or no to that.
And just for clarification, is the 45 decibels from CHIPS? Is it a CHIPS standard? Okay.
Okay.
So these are not changing anything. Yes, Den?
Well, one of the problems that you have with modernizations is particularly portables with wall-mounted HVAC units that are not ducted. The same thing with a lot of permanent buildings that may have wall-mounted units. And it would take a lot of cost to replace those and/or duct them.
And I'm going to be moving this conversation along this afternoon, but basically to resolve that issue is to go back to CHIPS and have CHIPS relook at that and redo their standards. That's how that issue can be addressed.
Thank you.
So, Chris, anything else?
Under minimum acoustical performance, it actually needs to be corrected for grammar.
Okay.
It says
E.
minimum acoustical performance is a prerequisite and equals 2 points.
But page 6, E.
Equals should be struck out. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Yeah. Just the equals that's after performance should be struck. Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Yes, Lee?
I guess I'm confused, Lisa. Do you want us to weigh in on this proposal, or were you just trying to make little tweaks to it? Or
No, we're not discussing whether you want to add to this proposal. This is the proposal as is.
Right.
And any other tweaks or additions, that's going to be implementation committee option B and C.
Okay.
So we're just discussing this because this is going to come before the state allocation board pretty much as is. And so I'm asking for tweaks, discussions, option 1, like what Chris pointed out, that Anything else? Do you have problems with how the language is written? Does the language need to be rewritten?
Because I would agree with Bill wholeheartedly that within the framework of the program as is.
We get it. No, we get to discuss that next.
Right.
We get to
Okay.
discuss that next.
All right.
So follow along with me. I got you guys. I'm not steering you wrong yet. So what I want to do is, with these changes that DSA wants, and a couple little tweaks, is the state is OPSC kind of? I mean, am I steering OPSC wrong?
No,
This
is our draft that we're proposing, trying to get feedback, input, but yeah, it's what we have so far.
Okay. So now, yep, Deborah.
Just a question on the process. I understand there was a working group.
Yes.
Were you part of that group?
Yes.
OPSC, CHIPS, CASH? And then, but yet when we came, what was brought today, we have two different proposals from that same working group.
Because there was agreement on some and not agreement on others. So that's why, hold on, follow me. Hold on, people, follow me. Follow me. Just hold on. There was a working group, and there was disagreement about who wanted what, when, where. This is OPSC's. There was a working group. Now we're going to go into what the implementation committee would like. And then I get to represent that proposal to the state allocation board. So, trust me, follow me. I got you. I got you. So, I see at least, I want to preface, A and B. A would be the one proposal, Dennis, that everything kind of stays as is, you don't increase the points, and you just double everything. Was that what you were talking about? But it doesn't have the 250 base. It just doubles everything.
Well, I was looking at, you were asking for comments on these regulations, OPSC's proposal. That was my comment on their proposal. However, I wouldn't make that as a separate, I would go with the cash and the CHIPS proposal as a separate option.
Would you like the board to consider the option of, if they decide to stay with this, just double everything?
If they decide to stay with this, yes.
Chris?
Well, if we're throwing out alternate options, finance would prefer an option that updates to the 2008 Energy Code and the 2009 CHIPS criteria and does not increase the grant levels and does not increase the point totals.
Okay, can you restate that one more time to make sure we all got it down?
Basically,
Update to 2008 Energy Code.
the 2009 CHIPS criteria, and then there's no adjustments for new points and no adjustments to the grant percentages. And I'd like to base that on the anecdotal evidence that was provided by Rob Samich.
Okay.
Chris, are you saying that you want to fund what the cost would be?
No. I'm saying I want to keep it consistent with what it is right now. Ultimately, we can consider other options, but given the expedited nature of putting this before the board, that's the only option we can support at this time.
Well, he mentioned his bid openings happening now, so maybe he can give us the real numbers instead of anecdotal data.
Okay, so the next option is that will just in pure form be brought to the state allocation board is the CHIPS proposal and cash proposal of the two-tiered system. Now, what I'd like to do, because that means OPSC's here, CHIPS cash here, it's not a blending of the two. I think what we can do for the next option that I'd like to see, because this is kind of where I'm going, is have the discussion of how would we blend the two options.
That's an excellent idea.
So let me throw out what I think, and then we can kind of go off of there. I think we should take what OPSC has put in front of us, and then I believe as the issues of predictability and consistency, districts knowing that they need a certain amount of funding, we know there are modernization projects out there. We know it's tied to eligibility. We don't know necessarily how many modernization projects are going to come in. But how do we do a blend of, because here's the hard part, and I asked this in the working group, and I still haven't gotten all the information. Rob Samish got about as close as what I've been asking for. I need justification for the 250. I have not got justification for the 250. However, 250 as a base is not justified because if we blend the two, it's the 250 base that comes directly state funded, and then you get the points and then the split based off of, whatever you get through the HPI. But if there was some sort of smaller base that seems more justified, because when you add in the dollars that you'll get for the points, you're going to get above 250. If we say we start at a $100,000 base grant, which can be reasonably justified for modernization, and maybe a $50,000 new construction base grant, and then you add in all the changes that OPSC has put forth, and then we take the time that maybe, I don't know if Brian and Juan, and some of the other experts as dealing with financial hardships of how we can look at financial hardships, but also use the base grant, as Margie pointed out in her letter, was given in tiers based on certain parts. You met a certain amount was released when you hit a certain part. I don't know if there's the ability to do that within these regs, but it seems a little bit more reasonable, because if you do get a $100,000 base grant and maybe a certain amount is released at design, and then, so you have that help with design as it's coming in, and then you also, when you go through the DSA, you get the points verification. You already have the 7 extra points that come on, and then you have extra points you can get. Looking at the modernization example that Brian put in the report, that they would then get 283,000. Yeah, so this is me talking out loud, so now you guys kind of, does this work? How does it work? How do we blend conversation?
Well, okay, so let me start out. A couple things. I think the issue of the size of the starter grant that is going to, I sort of agree with you, and to a certain extent, it's not clear exactly what the dollar value rationale is for 250. But I think it was pretty clear that we want to make the starter piece large enough to be attractive and to make it a clear incentive for districts to adopt this approach. And that's part of what's there. So it's got to be big enough, bigger than a shovel and, that kind of stuff. So I think, but this is not, it's kind of rocket science, but it's kind of not. I mean, you could go through a lot of different exercises to figure out what the rationale is, but to a certain extent, it's almost, I hesitate to say it, but it's almost political in some ways to figure out what's a number that you end up with that helps to kickstart this. Because what I heard the board members being was extremely frustrated with the program and the regulations the way they're written, because districts are not participating and the money's not going out. And this is a key priority, not just for the members of the board, but also for the governor. And the governor's not being well served by people who say, let's not increase anything and let's cut it all back. Because Governor Schwarzenegger is clearly a proponent of green schools and a very, very heavy, strong supporter of where we are. So I think it's important for us to arrive at something that is set at a level that will incentivize districts to participate in the program. And I don't know what the number is. And I don't know how to get there.
Okay, Dennis, Chris, Cesar, did I see you? And then Sean.
I agree with Bill. I think that we have approximately maybe, a year and a half left in this program without a new bond, something like that. And so far, this hasn't worked. We haven't been providing the incentive to get districts to come in and use this money. The worst thing that could happen is that we run out of regular bond money and we still have $50 million in the high performance left. And so we want to, it is a tricky situation in trying to figure out what that dollar amount is that incentivizes, but I would rather we'd go with a higher amount and provide enough incentive to get that money all out there while we still have modernization money left, rather than kind of easing into it and not getting as much response as we'd like.
And we actually need to talk about real dollars. We really only have 75 million left in the fund. So it's not 100, it's 75 million. Yeah. So, Chris?
The governor does support high-performance schools, green technologies. We want to increase participation. We don't know necessarily that increasing the incentive at this time will increase participation in the program. That $250,000 base grant that's being thrown around, we don't know that that will increase participation in the program. We do know, based on what Mr. Samich and to an extent CHIPS has provided before the board before, that many local school boards are reluctant to participate in the program. We don't know that that's because of the incentive level. We just know that many local school boards have not participated in the program.
Sean? And then Rob?
I don't think I know what the number is, but I did hear 4 anecdotal things, and they all threw out 250, and that's more than I've heard about any other number. So it seems like the thing that we have the most information about is 250. I mean, it sounded like that was the number used by some other grant program in 2003. It seems like what was the guy's name? Rob Samich. His seemed to support 250, and he said that he didn't think he had all the costs in there.
And let me explain where I came from with my $100,000 base grant, because if you look at page 3 of the write-up, it talks about a modernization project that on average is about $2 million. And it shows what the current points are, would get 108,000. With the added extra points would get 183,000. With the base grant, it would equal 283. So I'm thinking about 250 as the incentive, not 250 base and the 183 on top of it, which districts I know would love, but if we're talking about 250, then let's talk about 250. Let's keep it so that it seems somewhat rational if we're talking about keeping in the 250. That tends to have a little bit more justification behind it. I mean, what I'm looking for is the reasoning, the rationale, which Rob got close. You know, he was the first one to provide any incentive, but that's why I also chose the 100,000 and 50,000. Teresa, yeah, just a second. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt.
Sean, go ahead.
This really revolves around the construction cost. I know there are other costs associated with this, and I think that might be an obstacle for some of these other districts. Just even looking at it costs money, and that it's an obstacle.
Teresa, and then we'll go Rob and then Mary.
David Thorman, in the discussions of the work group, mentioned that it would be advisable to go with a scalability, and I think Jeff Becker also mentioned that earlier today, and that might be something you want to consider.
Can you say it again?
Scalability, and you could, based on the amount of square footage or based on the number of buildings or what's going on in the scope of work, then you would give a base grant rather than just anything, 250,000. You know, it's more logical.
And would it be on the cost of the mod, or?
It could be based on the square footage number. Richard, what do you think on that? There's just a number of ways you can do scalability, but I think CDE has different ways of measuring school projects, and we could, consult.
We'll ask Fred again when he decides to come back and join us.
But that was just a word that was used, and I think advisable.
Okay. Rob, then Mary?
I can just speak for myself and many other, boards that I've worked with and heard from, that it's really trying to justify the added expenses to the project. So just to Chris's point, I think if you asked me, I'd tell you matter-of-factly that it's lack of funding and lack of ability to justify the added expenses. So more money, in my mind, means more districts partake. Increasing the standards and lowering the level of funding will result in exactly what the board's frustrated with. But again, to the gentleman's comments earlier, those were just hard construction costs. And so I think Brian talked earlier about the importance of commissioning, now both on the front end and design and post-occupancy. It's critical, and it's also very expensive. It's critical enough that we're doing it without even doing HPI. And so it's a huge cost, including an acoustical engineer, on and on and on. So there's a lot of soft costs. So I don't want to stick with just the numbers he gave, which were an estimate that he even acknowledged was probably low. There's a lot of soft costs on top of that.
Okay. Mary, and then Chris, did you have something? Okay. Mary?
Well,
And then Lee?
I'd like to echo a little bit of Rob's comments. I work with a lot of different school districts and a lot of different school boards as a result of that. And I don't see any school boards out there saying, we could do it, but we just don't want to. They're not reaching that conclusion. They're reaching the conclusion that they would like to do it. They're getting pressure from their constituency nowadays. They're getting pressure from their own school students to do it. But they're not doing it because they don't have the money. And then a question coming back to, Lisa, the example you gave on the bottom of stamp page 3, where there's a significant increase in the grant. There's an assumption there that the modernization got 45 points, and I'd like to ask OPSC, is that how many of the modernization projects you're receiving are getting 45 points? Is that an average number? Is that a readily achievable number? Is that what experience is telling you?
The DSA has reviewed 14?
Yes, we've reviewed 14 projects in the average HPI.
Modernization.
Modernizations. Yes, sorry. 14
mods.
mods. Okay. These are rehabs or mods.
That was from last month.
And the average HPI points is 38.
So to get an increase of as much as documented here, you'd have to get significantly more points than the average project is getting.
It changes.
Under their proposal, you'd get 7 points.
Right. So a 38-point project would now be 45 with our
That's fair.
proposal.
Which is not doubling.
Almost.
Okay, we have
Which almost doubles.
Lee, and then Bill.
Thanks. I wasn't here this morning, so I'm not sure about Rob Samish's comments, but I would agree with, I think Rob said, I'm concerned that it's talking about construction costs only. In our experience, we have a LEED Silver school that just got built. We did not go after HP money because it was not enough, even with the LEED Silver school. My architect stated that the percentage based on and we could only go after mod. I'm not going to go into the details, but it was a mod. We would have only been eligible for mod funding and modernization funding. And he said there's no way that the money that we would have gotten would have only covered commissioning and design costs. It wouldn't have covered any construction costs increases at all. And so that's pure and simple why we didn't go after it. There were too many strings attached to it. It's not integrated with chips, and and this school is going to be a chip school and LEED Silver. That's how dysfunctional, to my mind, the program was, because why wouldn't we have gone after this extra money? And also in asking my architect about this and his experience working with other districts, he does say, unfortunately, contradicting what Mary said, he does find school boards who don't go after this because of the politics concerning global warming or whatever it means, green, whatever that is, and seen as something they don't necessarily want. And it's unfortunate, but he sees a level of lack of understanding on the part of school boards, a lack of understanding on the part of school staff that also don't support this. Because you really have to have a driver in the school district to go after this. You have to. It is extra costs. It is extra work, and you do have to have that. And so there's a lack of training. CSBA, I don't know how much. I know they're trying to do it. I know CHIPS is trying to do all this stuff, but it's not there yet, because remember, this is a whole new paradigm. It's coming out slowly, this whole shift in thinking. And so, but for the mod, I mean, to me, it's ridiculous that we didn't go after this funding. But that's just an example of why. I guess I'm on the 250,000. Was there a question? I have a question on it. Was that a grant, or did we have to match that?
It would be a grant.
Okay, so that we would be in favor of that. Yeah.
Juan, you had
more money, the better to get schools
Juan, you
to
had
do
a
it.
question? Hold on.
I don't know enough about the specific differences between LEED and CHIPS, but I don't know if you or maybe Bill, how is it that a school that's LEED certified cannot meet CHIPS? And again, I don't know the specific differences between the two programs. It was CHIPS, yeah.
Yeah, it was LEED and CHIPS. We didn't go after this money, the HPI.
Yeah.
We
Because
didn't
you
go
didn't
after this
qualify.
money, but we are LEED and CHIPS.
So if you're already CHIPS verified, how could you not, you still couldn't qualify for this grant?
The amount of different work that, this is what my architects tell me, that it didn't integrate enough, and the amount of extra stuff that we had to do, whether it was commissioning or whatever it was, wasn't worth it, he said.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. I thought that, maybe you guys can clarify this for me, but the criteria is part of the CHIPS verified. So if you're CHIPS verified, then chances are you would meet the criteria for this program. Can you guys help me out here?
No, Rob, I think.
I'll answer that if you'd like. Basically, we don't have any different requirements other than what CHIPS has, and we use their similar format. And we'd also have it on our online saying that if you're even LEED or CHIPS, if you give us your documentation in an equivalent manner of what we're doing, we will help you pull it through to be that point. And so, we have staff that will work with you, and it's unfortunate that occurred because it is an extra step. There is a fee that we charge, but we will work with you in every manner we can to with that documentation to make it, squeeze it into our box. So.
Okay, Bill, you were next, and then Chris.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about the hardship program, and I think that if we have a starter grant of $250,000 or whatever it is, I think that's a really good incentive that that could be used by districts that are in hardship status to ensure that they can be a part of the program. And so I think it's important. It's another piece of trying to create equity in the state, but using that piece that's a supplemental grant up front for to serve hardship districts, I think would be an important byproduct of this, and hopefully we can tie it to it in some way. I think, Madam Chair, the way you were describing kind of taking some money and releasing it up front and doing that kind of thing, unfortunately, the way the program works now, you have to go through the design process, have the design certified, go to DSA, and get it approved as a high-performance project first. So the money's over here when the design starts over here. So getting the money from there to there is probably, the way it's set up now, it doesn't work that way. So, anyway.
Okay, Chris?
Just an overarching comment. I just want to reiterate that the modernization program is designed to cover 60% of the cost with a 40% local match, and the new construction program is a 50-50 match. I'm concerned here that I keep hearing costs on the high-performance program as if the high-performance incentive grant is supposed to cover 100% of the costs. At best, it should be covering 60% or 50%, in our opinion.
Okay. Rob?
And I actually agree, Chris. So I think people are actually saying it doesn't cover the 60 and it doesn't cover the 50. But for OPSC staff, and pardon my ignorance on this, does this all become part of the 60% commensurate test as well? In other words, if you increase the level of funding, could it still end up that you only get what you get anyways because of the 60% commensurate, and you save the fear of overfunding the project?
So
you're
just
still
to
going to run the
clarify.
60% commensurate with the HPI grant included in the, so
Yes.
you're not going to overfund it in that, assuming the 60% commensurate test works,
Yeah.
right?
It would still apply.
Okay,
Another one. Just clarification on this is on the CHIPS and cash proposal, that the 250 would be just a grant without the local match. And again, just to piggyback on what Chris was saying, right now the high performance grant is under the new construction and modernization program, which does require the local match. So I don't think that we have the flexibility in statute right now to not require a local match just for high performance. Again, because it's a
Can
grant
OPSC
within new construction and modernization.
Can OPSC verify that? Can we ask our attorney whether that the ability is there or not, so that we actually can say yes or no?
Yep.
Because if this is coming to the board, we need to make sure that that authority exists in statute.
I think I remember
part of
talking.
it.
I think we talked about this at the work group, and we came to that conclusion, but we'll double check to make sure.
We don't have all the statutes, but even our authority, and this is on stamp page 2, we talk about the money that's set aside for high performance and that it's part of a new construction modernization projects. New construction modernization is defined in the program, and it defines the local match requirement. So, but we'll clarify, we'll confirm, but that's at least my understanding.
Deborah?
What was your conclusion from your work group?
We didn't think that we'd be able to separate the two, that we'd be able to give an incentive grant without having a match. It wasn't something that, I think we talked about it briefly at a work group meeting, so it wasn't something that was as part of our research that we were doing for this item.
So for the cash and chips people, was that your understanding too?
Fred?
One, you said so it comes out of new construction where a standard hardship would also come out of that pot, right?
Financial or facility?
Financial.
Yes.
Right. And whether there is room in the statute to say, and I believe it says, a unmet facility need in financial hardship, if that would allow the flexibility to provide that.
Well, you have to qualify. There's certain criteria to meet financial hardship status. And if that's the case, then the state pays for 100%. Are you thinking that there's an exception to that?
Well, no, I just said whether has enough flexibility to look at it in a manner to
We'll have to take a
effectuate
look.
that end.
Yeah, I didn't bring my ed code book with me, but
Oh, I know it.
but yeah, we'll take a look.
Mavon?
Thank you. I just wanted to say at the working group, what was brought up is that in statute, this is a designated funding source, and it says incentive grants. So it does not specify 50% or 60%. So I think the term incentive gives that kind of flexibility. That was part of the discussion at the working group. Thank you.
Chris, then one?
I'd also note that it specifies in statute that it is a subset of new construction and modernization, and that was actually part of the Bond Act.
Okay, one, and then Mamie? You were going to say the same thing? Mamie?
I just need a clarification. Under the current program, forget how you get there, but you get the money, you match it. Is that what you're saying, under the current program? Yes. So then in financial hardship, then let's say you qualify for $100,000, that would be $200,000 of operative money. So then under the current program, this is a question, if one qualifies for financial hardship now, they would actually get 100 and 100 out of the financial hardship program. And does the other 100 come out of the HPI side, or does it come out of the program side, or do you know?
The high performance grants comes out of 1D, because that's the bond that's set aside high performance.
Out of that pot?
Yeah, out of that pot. But to answer your question, yes, right now, the state would pay for both the local match and the state's share, which 100 plus 100,
and
if you qualify for financial hardship.
And both sides of that would come out of the HPI pot?
No. The HPI grant only would come out of that pot. The rest of it would come out of new construction, in this case, a new construction pot. There isn't a financial hardship pot. It would come out of new construction and modernization.
So if it were just an incentive, then you would get that, whether you had to match it or not, if it were under incentive.
I'm not following me.
In other words, if you followed and it said, forget what you're doing now, but it was an incentive grant and you got this amount of money. However you get there on the calculations. So that in financial hardship, you technically could get this, and the state could come back and say, well, we're not going to fund the other side if it were under incentive only?
I think
Or is that too convoluted yet?
a little bit. I think financial hardship, the state can pay for the local match and the state share if the district qualifies for financial hardship, whether that's a new construction project or modernization. You still have to meet the criteria under those programs. It's just a matter of financing the project. Your financial hardship, the state is going to pay for both, but it's going to be under the rules and regulations for either modernization or new construction. So that still applies. High performance, the grant, we fund the high performance grant out of 1D. And then depending on whether it's modernization or new construction, the rest of the money may come out of 47 or 55. But the 1D money the money for high performance is strictly from 1D. And to go back and just clarify, there isn't another financial hardship pot. It comes out of either new construction or modernization. When the state pays for the local match.
Okay, Lee?
Without getting into all the minutia, I think that the justification, Lisa, and you were asking for that, is that idea, and I read it somewhere, I think in the proposal, the word supercharge. There needs to be a financial incentive for districts to do this. And that would do it. I'm not sure whether 100,000 would do it.
What, 150 or 200? But why does everybody keeps saying 250 without data to say 250 was a threshold that got people there, because there were grants that were at 250. But with the program, that's why I said if we do the base at 100, that's a guaranteed 100 base, but through everything they'd get 250.
And that's true. I just think you'll get, the lower the money is, the lower participation you'll get. I just think that doing the improvements, we want green schools, right? The more you give school districts to do green schools, the better and more green the schools will be. It's just purely money. We want to do these projects, but we need the funding to do it. So again, going with the governor's desires, it's just purely, you can talk people into it.
I get it, but I'm also coming from, this is policy. We're creating policy. I need rationalization for that policy. So, Teresa, you got something?
Well, I'm kind of an idea person, so I'll just throw this out.
We like ideas.
So it's just an idea. And that is that, okay, you're giving out a flat amount of money, $250,000. It's a lot of money. Okay, so what are we getting for it? We had some suggestions in the work group that maybe we get a resolution. Maybe we also get a promise. I mean, the legislation is saying, well, for 250 you have to have LEED, CHIPS, or HPI. Well, since we could tie it to HPI, we could say, okay, we'll give you 250, but you have to meet these many points in the HPI. But by them knowing that they have the 250, they at least know what to plan for. And I think that's one of the issues, is that people not knowing what to plan for and not knowing that it's in their hands and available, that they can spend upon it. And I think that might be, I mean, I'd like to hear from the other architects here and what they think in the planning process, that might help their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go Bill, then Juan.
Thank you, Rob. I was going to comment as a non-architect, but no, I mean, the starter grant that's being proposed is in fact tied to meeting the minimum point thresholds of 20 points or 27 points. Okay, so it's not for nothing.
There is, okay.
And so just want to make sure to clarify that. And I have to clarify one other thing. This funding program and the ed code for this is not a subset of new construction. This is a separate program, and we have the ed code reference that we'd be happy to share, so our attorneys can battle your attorneys later. But we believe that it is an appropriate use of the funds.
Juan, then Chris.
So you're saying that it's not within the new construction modernization program?
If you read the way it's...
Is that what I just want to clarify.
Where did my people go?
Somebody
Patty.
Anyway, Patty, could you come up and scroll through your BlackBerry for us? Sorry. Could you just provide the information that you provided me? And maybe I misunderstood it, but
No.
I'm a simple person.
Hi, I'm Patty Herrera with Cash. What I was showing to Bill earlier was the area in the Ed Code section that delineates the funding under Prop 1D. And under Subdivision A, there are a number of paragraphs that state how much money is into new construction, how much money goes to modernization, and all the programs that 1D funded. And one of the separate paragraphs of that subdivision is the High Performance Schools Incentive Grant for $100 million. So while the regulations tie the incentive grant to a new construction or modernization pot for purposes of calculating the incentive grant pursuant to the project's eligibility, the Ed Code section is very separate from new construction and modernization. And that's section, you guys have it in your authority, 101012A8.
Mm-hmm.
So with all due respect, Chris, we would, yeah.
I would just note that in that code section, it says, in new construction and modernization projects that include the attributes of high-performance schools, including but not limited to the elements set forth in Section 17070.96 pursuant to regulations adopted by the State Allocation Board. And clearly, the regulations and statutes say that there is a local match of in both new and modernizations.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with your interpretation of the existing regulation. I would just posit that we have the ability, per the statutory flexibility, to change that regulation so as to provide a starter kit grant that is not required to be matched, because I think that's the question, right?
That's why God gave us lawyers.
Okay. I know, go figure. I know, heaven forbid. If there's public comment, please don't raise your hand, come up so that, you can.
Well, except for Lyle.
Hello. Lyle Smoot, Los Angeles Unified School District. There's so many things to say, I don't even hardly know where to start, but I'd just like to start, I'm going to say one thing about this example, and I think the problem is this example isn't a realistic example. It's a $2 million modernization project. I doubt that's the average cost of a modern allowance, grant, whatever, of a modernization project. 45 points, we've already heard that the average...
Before we go, Brian, was this an example that you took from DSA?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's an example, but it's not an example that's realistic. And that's my point, is that this example would lead you down a path of saying, hey, look, you're going to go from 108,000 to 183,000. That's not what's going to happen in most of the cases, I suspect. Now, I don't know the answer, but what is the average? Well, we already heard that the average isn't 45, it's 38. And I would say to you, that 38 represents today's program. I want to know what that same project, those same 14 projects you're going to have after you implement the new energy code and the new high-performing schools numbers. Where would that 38 points be? So when you look at this and you say, okay, you're going to go from 108 to 183, that sounds great, except that that's not going to happen in most cases, number one. And number two, and I think this is more important, there's no relationship. And we're talking about 250, and you say, well, how about 100? How about 150? 250? We don't really know the answer, okay? Nobody can sit here and say, here's the answer to the question of how much it's going to cost. Clearly, there's no relationship here to cost. It could be 108, 183. That could be more, less. Nobody has any idea. You got $75 million here. Let's spend it and find out the answers. And the way to do that, quite frankly, is to establish a grant that has an incentive, a real incentive. Let's do these projects. $250,000 will provide that. And I think if you start talking about, let's throw out some other number without facts to back up any number, 250 or 100 or 150, there's no number that anybody's going to say this is the right number. But if you do it, and do it so that there is an incentive, and 250, we believe, will create an incentive with other adjustments too. Then you've got the basis for, you're going to spend the $75 million, hopefully. You'll accomplish the goals of high-performing schools, and you'll have answers. And then you'll know for the next go-around what's the right thing to do. And I think that's really the thing that's going on here, is that throwing this stuff out and just saying, well, this is what we think, but that's what we think, nobody really knows. So
Well-
why don't we do something that'll let us get the information we need to figure it out? And so with the 60% commensurate test, and I'll say it for me at least, 60%, whether that's matched or not matched, quite frankly, I don't give a hoot. You know, in Los Angeles, we're going to do the projects. And so if we can get the money to do the project right, that's good.
Thank you, Lyle.
Thanks.
So I think I actually want to go back to the proposal brought out, of the idea brought out by DSA and talk about the feasibility of if we were to do something, one sliding scale. Fred, you were out of the room when we talked about sliding scale, and in the working group, the feasibility of sliding scale instead of just doing a throw out no justification for 250, 150, 200,000. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'd just like to have staff respond to the example and how they came up with that, to some of Lyon's comments, please.
Okay.
Yeah, Lyle was talking about the modernization example where we used a $2 million base grant. That was typical from what we've seen. We used a real example from DSA of 45 points. That was high compared to the average. They tell us the average is 38 points. If we had used 38 points as the starting point and they got 12 additional, the difference wouldn't be a 69% increase in funding. It would be more than double the funding. It would be going from 3.31% to 7.24%. So it would be even more dramatic had we used the 38 points instead of 45. Just wanted to respond to that.
Okay, thank you. So I want to go back to sliding scale. Go.
I have a sliding scale idea. Well, I mean, and this is going to sound funny, but maybe the sliding scale is not so much related to the project size, although it ties into it, but the way that it's proposed in the CHIPS and cash proposal right now, it's with 20 points or 27, which is the minimum required. If we're hearing that the average is at 38, maybe the sliding is tied to the level of the project points that the project is getting or achieving, because it's reflective of the level of investment of funds and the return on the investment. So, I mean, to me, I don't mean this in a bad way, but getting 20 points it's a walk in the park for most projects where you're doing major scope, where you're doing a project like LA does or that we do, where you do full modernizations or big projects and you have local bond funds. That's pretty simple to get the basic level, but it's a challenge for us, and it costs a lot of money to get 45 points. And we have a number of projects that are in the 42. We spend a ton of money doing it, and so I think if you tied the sliding scale to the level of the points achieved, in some ways more, that for the startup grant, for the basic startup grant, whatever, 100, take it up from there. So, anyway.
Chris?
Not that I support this, but you could always throw out there tying it to eligibility as well on the project. That gives you some sliding scale between all the projects as well.
Eligibility is always sticky. Any other thoughts on the sliding scale? I mean, Bill, what do you think?
Well, connecting the sliding scale conversation to the example that was just given, to me, a sliding scale is really not different than the formula that we already have. I mean, that's a sliding scale. So, to me, that's already built in, and you can say, what should the slope of that line look like? And that's great, and that's why, one of the proposals that we've outlined is to double that. I mean, that basically is a sliding scale that's steeper. But I did want to go back to the example, because I've thought about this a lot, based on trying to do the numbers and trying to figure out going back to the porridge example from this morning, is that what we have are two pieces of data. We've got the data based on the dozen projects that have come in under a program that's not working. And for whatever reason, those projects have come in anyway. They've been based on, in most cases, a commitment on the part of the district, irregardless of the incentive funding. And we're saying, well, what score did those projects get? And they're, an average of 38. But what we really want to know is the projects that haven't come in the door, what would their average score be? The ones that we hope to incentivize to be part of this program. And what I'm saying to you is I believe that number is going to be closer to 20. And so if we start looking at what the incremental costs are going to be, I think you've got to base it to, if you're really going to look at a sliding scale or look at some different level, you've really got to have the example that's built on the minimum score, not on a 38 or 45 point threshold. So, I mean, I think that's where, again, the most important piece in this is the lump sum, whatever that is. But I think as far as using an example, we have to think about the project that's not in the system, not the ones that we've looked at already.
So, in blending in the sliding scale, Bill, you can stay there because I'm gonna, I want to hammer some version of some option of some blend. Hammer them out. So if we're thinking about average, we can only look at data that we have. So far, what's come through DSA, average points 38. And these are obviously districts that were committed to doing this, not related on the amount of funding you are potentially going to get. So if we're looking at Chips and Cash's proposal of basing or tying in something, what if the 20 points you start off, that the sliding scale, the 20 points gets you started off with modernization at 100,000. And then you base it on up incrementally, if in rewriting or tying in regs to allow that base incentive to be included upon it. Because whether it's legal or not legal now, you can always change reg to make it legal. And you can always interpret statute until somebody files suit. So it would be Department of Finance filing suit if it was disagreed upon.
Or taxpayers.
Yeah, or taxpayers. Hold on, Dennis. So if you started off at 100,000, understanding that maybe what you use as the base point or the average point of 38 gets you to a 200,000, and anybody that it goes above and beyond at a certain point, up to, 45 points or something where you can get 250. Dennis?
It seems to me with the discussions that should be kind of reversed, because it seems to me that the people coming in with the lower amounts are the ones that need the more incentive. Maybe we start out with somebody coming in at 20 points with $250,000 and then decrease that so that at 45, 50 points you're down to $100,000.
No, well, here's the problem. The people coming in are actually the smaller that may need more help. It's
Right.
not, so I kind of get what you're saying, but it's maybe parsing out that those that is smaller financial hardship maybe get something. But, then, because I don't want to incentivize just doing 20 points to get 250. That's going to do the reverse of what we want.
Well, but you're still, for that 250,000, you're still doing 20 points worth of sustainable work.
Understood, but right now we got an average of 38 points coming in, so I don't want to
no.
incentivize them going down to 20.
But I understand this, and what I'm saying is that what I'm thinking is the projects that we're missing here, because they don't even bother to come in, are those small, probably maybe rural school districts that have small modernization projects that don't even want to consider this. So they're probably not at a scale where they're going to get much more than 20 points just because of the scale of the project. That's just a guess on my part.
And I'm with you for small or rural that can provide that, but just to create it as an incentive and slapstick that in for universal, no. I think that provides the wrong direction, Yeah, Deborah?
Well, then maybe there needs to be something addressed for the small rural schools in addition to the facility or the financial hardship folks, because I know that was another issue we talked about with the equity for those projects.
Sean?
It sounded to me that the difference between the people that are filing and the ones that aren't were local bonds and not district size. So maybe we should be looking at something that's not creating a discrepancy based on the thing that's not really driving it.
Deborah, is that, what do you know?
I don't know, but I know, well, when I did my project, it was very much like Lee was stating about hers. I mean, we didn't pass the bond. Our bond capacity at that time was very, very low in our community. But the bottom line is we just could not afford to do it. And by saying that everybody, like some projects need, 250 and some, the sliding scale doesn't work for smalls. Our projects still cost the same. We're just not on that larger scale, and we still have to go out, and I forget the word you were talking about when you get the acoustic people in and you're paying for them, and whether it's
Acoustical engineering?
Yes, and when you're doing the analysis, whether it's a small project or a big project, you have to have it. So if your project is small, it still costs the same to bring in the folks for the analysis. So to say that they don't need as much money is not correct.
So any other ideas? Because we've got Juan?
Just a quick question for DSA. Guys, do you know, do we have information on costs, actual costs?
Yes, we do.
For these high-performance
We can work with
attributes.
other DGS departments to work on that if you like. Don't you think, Richard? We have an estimating section. I know where you're going with this, but go ahead and ask your question. It's all going the same place.
Yeah, you're not getting cost data. We have it.
That's what I was asking. If you have any kind of information on cost to do these high-performance attributes, when you're reviewing your high-performance rating criteria or as part of the project, do you guys get any more information on just this aspect of it?
Let me qualify. We don't do that with the plan review that we work through. However, we have resources in the DGS, in the Department of General Services, to provide that information.
It may not be.
Oh, Richard, Mike. Webcast.
We have a vast array of data on projects, but I don't know that any of it is specifically related to the features, the high-performance features included in the design, because we don't ask for that. We ask for the construction cost, the bid when it comes in, and the tracking of dollars by the regulations that we have. But I don't think we have that identified in increments that could be identified, okay, these are high-performance features. Now, in preparing cost estimates and stuff, they could probably be tracked that way, but we wouldn't do that. That would have to be come from the
It's
outside.
difficult to pull out, as he says, it's a comprehensive approach.
Well, the soft costs would be easily identified, because if you're hiring somebody to do something, you know what it's going to cost.
Yeah, but I think I know where you're going with this, and that is that if we give a base grant for $250,000 and they have to meet 20 points, if we were to research as to what those 20 points might be, knowing 7 of them are already going to be, if you agree with the new regs of beefing up the prerequisites, 7 of them will be the prerequisites. Those can be pretty much thrown out because at least it gets them on the board, okay? And then the other 13 we could take a look at as to, well, what would those maybe be, and would that add up to $250,000? Is that where we're going with this? One? Okay.
Okay, then I have Dennis, Sean, then Lee.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit skeptical about coming up with numbers like that, because as I mentioned before, it's very, how do I say it? It's the whole building type approach. It's like you put in high efficiency lights that decreases the need for HVAC, and you have to downsize it. You will downsize your HVAC. Now, where is that a cost savings because you downsize the HVAC on the HVAC, or is it on the lights? Or it's
very complicated.
Trying to come up with a method to say that point costs that much money is going to be very difficult.
In response to that, Juan?
again, trying to come up with a method to justify this base grant. So help us get there.
It's called Help Us Help You, besides
Yeah.
just throwing out 250.
We got it, but I
No,
mean, I don't-
no, Bill, no, it's Sean Lee
Put
than
me in
you.
line, will you?
We've tried to allocate project costs to high performance, try to assign costs to the high performance features. Some of them you can do it, but we inevitably get to a point where you can no longer differentiate between high performance and regular building. And we just never get to the final answer.
Okay. Lee?
On our efforts, it was a new school, and I asked the architect, just give me in layman's terms so I could answer this question, so I could talk to my public and everything, because they asked, what does it cost to build this green school? And we got to a number of 6% higher, 6% more. That's a new construction. It was an elementary school. And I'm just saying that was my example. And if I started to then say, okay, then what do we think we could do with 6% more on a modernization project that's coming up? What would we be able to do? And the answer was not much. Because you're dealing with so many old systems, and it's such a different thing. That's why I know Lisa and I will work to get some justification on the 250,000, but the costs are just so tremendous to try to do a 40-year-old school, try to get it to be green. And so, I just know 6%, to my mind, 6% stuck out to me for my new construction, and I go, okay, well, I'm going to use that as a baseline for me to work with my architects to try to think of what do I need to do on mod, but that's as close as I could get in my district for you.
Bill? And then Teresa.
I just think, given the time frame that we have, and I appreciate that we're trying to help you get there, but, I mean, given the time frame that we have, or that we seem to be wanting to have to take something to the board, I'm not sure it's going to be, we're going to be able to come up with some decent numbers in that short of a time frame. And the best resource that we have when we're going through this process is, again, when we do design options.
Come on, Bill, you've had 2 weeks to try and find me numbers.
I know it's not the first time you're asking. Okay. But, you have to always look at your baseline cost first of what you would do, so, and then compare it with what you end up putting in and the net incremental cost for that, the soft costs, all of those things. So it's not an easy exercise.
Rob?
So I would concur with what Bill just said and with what Lee said. It's not an easy exercise to come up with, but what we know is it's not working. Nobody's participating. And I don't want to make it sound too simple, but if it's part of the 60% commensurate test, what do you care how high the number is? Because it's going to get adjusted.
We're just trying to come up with an objective way to increase the grants.
And the
this
number
one
we're
isn't
using
in the-
right now, not the 250, where did that come from?
It's based on the points in each of the different,
No, so this was all just dreamt up, and it's no different than what we're talking about right now. We're trying to put more money in the program so that people can afford to do it. There are districts that politically they think global warming, for whatever reason, they got a 5-member board and 3 of them think it's a farce, right? And they're not going to partake. I would say 90% of the districts, however, aren't doing it because they can't afford it. And so if it's the 60% commensurate test is going to make us whole one way or the other, either the day we submit the 04 or on project closeout. So it's not going to get overfunded.
And here's the thing. I'm also wanting you guys to know I'm playing devil's advocate because this is policy, and so we really have to think about the impacts of policy and not throwing something out there that really doesn't have a true rational basis. So what about this? What if there is a 250 base grant if that's where you start, and then the points get added onto that, and that's all part of the 60%? Yeah. Well, because Bill, Chips and Cash are saying 250 base grant, just base grant, not part of the 60%, no matching. So what if the 250 then becomes in as part of the 60%?
And so what I think the subtle difference here is, the grant is the 250 is a grant that you're not required to match, but that would still be lumped into project costs and subject to the 60% commensurate test. Right? The above and beyond the 250, you still have to match.
Correct. I'm saying, what if the 250 is where you start, then you take all of that, and then that total is all part of the 60%?
I think we're talking about two different.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, no.
You're talking about the 60-40 split between the state and the district match, and Rob's talking about the 60% commensurate test.
Okay.
To ensure you're not overfunded.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So which is it?
It's both. I would be suggesting both.
Dennis?
Well, when this program started, as we've talked about, the fact that there's not a connection between the points that CHIPS has established and any funding levels. So when this started out, and I was a part of that, it was really a stab in the dark as to what the funding level should be for this. And I think what we've, and it was backed up with a little bit of data, but the data wasn't, real concrete. I think what we've found over the past couple years is that it's not working. So I think we need to drop back and take another stab in the dark and try it out for a while and see if it works. And I think that's what is the cash proposal, is that let's try something that and see if it works for a while. And what I said before, I think is very valid, is the fact that we don't have much time left in this program, and we've got to take some measures to get people to apply for this money so that it will go out before the program ends.
Let me say this more clearly. Help me help you. I asked this very clearly in the working group. Provide me numbers. Rob Samish was the only one to provide me numbers. Provide me something tangible. Don't provide me projects that got a 250 grant. Provide me the numbers within those projects that got me that got the 250 grant. How did that 250 grant help?
Well, two things. First of all, we're applying a different microscope or magnifying glass to a rationale that we're trying to have from the rationale that was originally used for those grants. And as I indicated, we're working with the Energy Commission to get sort of their original rationale that they used for the 250. But two things. One, on Rob Samish's number, he was very concerned in sharing those numbers that they would develop a life of their own. And I assured him that because of our commitment to provide numbers, that life would be a good life. But with that said, just the caveats I think that are critical in there is that he focused on features that clearly have a differential cost. So when he talked about the HVAC system and various the dollar components, the commissioning, those are things that had a clearly identifiable cost, especially related to modernization projects. But he had a whole list of caveats in terms of other things that weren't included, primarily water efficiency type things, recycled content items. Clearly, none of the soft costs were included in that. So, those things were not part of those numbers, and I think that's really important.
And that's where help
But
me help
one
you
other
write
thing.
that down.
One other, we've got that, and we can confirm the information that Rob supplied. But when I think about what a modernization project might look like, and I think Michelle Healy's still back there. She is. I think about the kinds of projects that they're doing in Marysville, and so I think as another anecdotal number, I would hope that I could volunteer to work with her because she shared some of the numbers, but I think those are more realistic in terms of the kinds of projects. They committed as a district to go green, so they went through the HPI whether or not it made financial sense directly or not. But I think it's more typical of the kind of projects that I would like to see apply to HPI where their district isn't already on board. And so the question is, what would that look like? So I think that there's such a small sampling right now, but that's, I think, an excellent example of where we might be able to say, what did that look like in terms of the basic costs for a modernization project? But I think it gets back to, we need to provide that certainty, and I think that's a better starting place than boosting up sort of the sliding scale and starting there.
Well, and Teresa, is there a possibility from DSA, can I just get the name of the districts in an email or something like that have all...
Right here. Of all the districts that have done mods?
Yeah, because then I can personally call and get numbers from them.
Okay.
I would know how to find them.
I also am going to send you a document, and I think it's been commented on around the room here, is that getting to the cost of green is very, very difficult. There's been a study done by Davis Langdon, and have you seen that study?
I heard about it. I haven't.
Okay, basically it says that depending what you put into the building, how you design it, because you can do bells and whistles, you can do pretty stuff, you can do all kinds of different things in a building that cost you money, or you could do a really, a very basic, simple building. But then how you put the green in it, what they're finding is, depending, it's anywhere from 2%, it's 2 to 3%. It can go up to 6% in some cases, and even if it's gold or certified, it's still within that range. So I can send you that document.
Well, and I think
that's the frustration here.
I think what's valuable is I'm not looking for a set of numbers. I'm just looking for certain factors. Rob Samish knew that he could find, certain things cost estimated a certain amount, so that we could provide a uniform of rough estimates, a universe of rough estimates, just like I think Marysville, I would greatly appreciate, just understanding some of your numbers and where they came from and what the cost was, because you went through that, and that's what provides the justification for changing and looking at things differently when you have those hard numbers that paint that story other than just throwing something out there. Chris?
While it's not the entire project cost, I believe Sean said there were certain components that LA had split out and could say,
There were some that we could say, yes, this is a high-performance feature, and this is how much it costs. The problem is you get to other things where, like, if you raise the height of the room, how do I separate that out from what it would have cost me if it were a
not
foot
to put
shorter?
you on the spot, but would it be possible to get the ones that we do know are high-performance features only and look at the data between what the high-performance feature is versus what it's not? It gives us some starting point.
I think it's fair as long as people know what they're looking at and they don't use it in an inappropriate way. Don't take those numbers and say, this is what high performance costs, because it's not. It's only a portion.
Dennis and Deborah?
You can get, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you can get, I think it's up to 4 or 5 points for daylighting and views out of windows. How are you going to say that window, what portion of the cost of that window is attributable to that point or those points, and what portion of it is just attributable to the fact that you need windows?
Or they had to meet code.
Or what?
Or you had to meet code.
Or you had to meet code. Exactly. It's like it's a complex way. You cannot sit down and say this particular point costs this much, because it's a totally integrated thing in the design, and they're very interrelated.
Deborah?
Well, I don't think we're getting anywhere. I know that's such a profound statement, but it seems like we keep coming back around to giving incentives to districts that are already doing this. Bottom line is, my understanding today, the discussion was, how do we get the money out there to have people do this that aren't doing it? And to keep going back to LA and saying, give us some numbers, tell us what you're doing, it's not going to get those folks not participating. And, throw out a number. And if you don't have any takers, then you know it was too low. If you give them a little more money and you get the money out like you want to do, then you've done it. So,
Yeah. Rob, then Sean.
I don't think you need to, Sean, because she's, and I agree with what Deborah just said, and so I'll really burst the bubble and tell you that even at 250,000, no takers. Commissioning alone is at least $80,000. I mean, 250 is not going to get you there. And so we can sit up here and say we only are going to give you exactly what you can justify on this day, and we're going to pick that apart because of the things that Dennis and Bill and others are bringing up. There still won't be any takers at 250. I hate to say it, but it's true. And that's just the facts, but I can't defend those with numbers.
Sean, do you want to?
But I will tell you where I'm coming from today. We can continue to access high performance. What I suspect will happen is when we're done accessing it, and when San Bernardino's done, and when the few other people are done, there's still going to be money sitting there because it's not adequate and it's not providing an incentive for the school districts that don't have money right now. So I would rather us do something that lets other people access it, because if we don't, I think it's going to sit there and someone's going to take it and move it to some other place when there isn't anything else to do with it.
Okay, Bill and Dennis?
Yeah, again, we're not going to get anywhere in terms of making a rational definition of the correct dollar amount today. It's a decision about creating something that will kickstart the program and create an incentive for districts that aren't participating to be a part of it. But that said, I'm going to stand up for those of us that are doing HPI projects and say, you know, it's not, we're doing it and we're spending local bond funds to do it, a lot of local bond funds to do it. And so I don't think you need to bash us for being there and taking advantage of it. We need more money, too, to handle this. The fundamental issue is the basic grant for modernization is too low to do the work you have to do. I'm sorry, I know we're not here to solve that problem, but that's the real problem. There's not enough money in the modernization grant to modernize schools.
Dennis?
Now I forgot.
What? Okay, so to kind of have a little summary conversation as we move forward, first and foremost, let me say it again, no guarantee this is going to be on the April SAB. I'd like to see it. If there's the ability to do that, we're going to try and do that. If there is, what is confirmed and what we have is the OPSC proposal. What I will talk to Juan about as he's kind of stepped out is maybe quickly next week, see if we can't have a quick maybe working group meeting, you know, to pull together, or if OPSC doesn't want to be part of it, maybe I call them and we have the plan B, because I'm not sure OPSC, you know.
Brian's not doing anything.
I'm just listening.
You know.
If you do hold one, can you include a finance as well?
Sure, absolutely.
Lisa, of course, we'd be involved, yeah. Yeah.
But just because I'm hearing the board, and I know that this is not going to be enough with what's being presented to the board, and so how do we come up with, you know, a blending or something that may not make everybody happy, but may be a next step in the right direction? Because I think what OPSC has done is provide that basis in DSA and the working group, and I think everybody should say we recognize there's a problem. How we solve that problem, there's not agreement on, but we're at least taking steps in the right direction to do that. What we know in a year and 6 months, you know, who knows? I think we'll, you know, we may or may not be back here, but there is $75 million out there. We are running out of 1D money. How it'll be accessed, well, if, you know, LAUSD and San Bernardino City and some others, and Bill, you guys take it, then, you know, I guess the money went out. You know, we'd like to benefit other districts, but then I think it provides information for the future of how to potentially address the issues that may not have been addressed. But I think probably what we need to do is have, or try and get a working group meeting next week to a certain extent to hammer this out a little bit more, knowing that if it, whether it goes or not, I think we still need to, you know, work on something. Yes,
Well, I think that's a good idea, but what I'm hearing needs to be hammered out is you want to try and develop a recommendation with a rational basis for the Kickstart grant, correct?
Correct.
And I guess what I would ask the committee, and through the chair, is my sense of the committee, maybe with one exception or two, is that the committee would have as a consensus that perhaps the OPSC piece that they've done is a good start, but it shouldn't go forward without a further kickstart incentive coupled to it to be an effective program change.
And I can adequately represent that. Chris, and then Rob? Oh, no, Rob?
The prerequisites I heard earlier, they're being beefed up, but only in that we're adding points to those, right? We're not adding prerequisites.
We added
correct.
7 points.
We added points, but not
We're adding-
right.
no,
There's
that's right.
7 points that create a base.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Requirements to
and
meet them have changed,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's already
That's why I
cost you more to do it.
That's where I was going next. So I agree with what Bill just said. I think that the regs in front of us today would be fine, but if the board, and it's what I heard the board say, they want more participation, throw in some more money on that grant, you'll get some, not as much as they probably hope. And if you really want to get cuckoo, get rid of a prereq or two. Just, I throw that out there. Acoustical might get the job done.
Chris?
On a separate issue, but it's still a global issue that need to be addressed for all of them, on implementing these items or these regulations, I just want to note that we'd prefer it for projects moving forward, not projects that have already completed the process.
So would we do potentially a grandfather from the date of the board approval?
Because the projects that have already come through have received their approvals, have received their funding level, and at this point, to have either an unfunded approval or an apportionment, have stated that they're okay with that funding level, that that is the level that that project is at.
Well, I'm
That's
saying,
what I'm getting
hold
at.
on, what
That
I'm...
those have been approved.
Yeah,
Wasn't there a date in here, Chris?
Earlier, I'm just getting back to a comment that I believe Ms. Garrity made, where she said she wanted it at the contracting date. If you did it at the contracting date, it would include more than just new projects that are being submitted, additional projects being submitted. It would apply to already apportioned projects, which would then run into the full and final apportionments problem. And it would also include projects that have already received an unfunded approval.
I think an easy way to parse that is you could do a grandfather of the regs into board approval date, so that any projects then coming after would apply even as the regs are being drafted and going through Office of Administration.
Sure.
That's it. You know, it gets
And that's the
legally
intent
dicey.
of what I'm saying is, from this point moving forward, as opposed to anything previous to this.
Yeah. Mavon?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Chris for his comment. Actually, I hadn't envisioned what you just said. I was thinking more about future projects. So, yeah, I think we would have to work that out. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I comment on that timing question? Because I have a number of projects that have gone through but actually haven't received an apportionment yet. So perhaps if the regs were changed, I could go back and have, I'm sure with paying another fee, DSA review my HPI or whatever if it needed to be. Anyway, it sounds like what I would say is the date of apportionment would be a cutoff date. If the project's received an apportionment, then it's not eligible for any change in that.
Yeah, that's something to consider.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Bill's statement that the projects that are on the unfunded list, they have not been apportioned yet. So at least that need to be considered in
Sure. So the general consensus is only unapportioned projects.
No, I think what Bill is saying is true, which is there are projects right now are on the unfunded list that those are not final apportionments.
Correct.
And therefore, these projects, from our point of view, should be considered.
and that's something we can present to the board when
So
this
to the extent then that projects convert to apportionment prior to these regulations being enacted, they are what they are, correct?
Yes.
Well, what did OPSC mean on stamp page 6 on the last line there with their date in your proposal?
Oh, that's a DSA.
Okay.
There's that date again.
Teresa, that's at the bottom of are you talking about indoor environmental
Is
quality?
that what it is for? Okay.
Yeah, that's as already existed
Okay.
in law.
Was there anything in your proposal that had a cutoff date?
No.
No?
I'd like to add that it might be nice that if it's been stamped out by DSA, then it needs to start again through the process. So once that stamp has been given, we use that as somewhat of the demarcation.
But you proposed that districts not be able to come back in after the fact. So if you want to be able to do that for some of these that are already reviewed, we'd have to make sure the regulations reflect that.
Help me out here.
Well,
If a project has been stamped out through our process, and then you change something that requires a review, an additional review, we in essence have to open up the project again to do that.
And it might affect structural, it might.
Well, I mean, it could affect anything. Hey, wait a minute, hold on. In all likelihood, it.
You're not going to get any takers, don't worry.
Anyway, sorry, thank you, Deborah. As she said, we'll get no takers on this. No, I mean, we need to be able to address that some way, because some of the ones that have come back in were pretty significant.
Right.
And some of them actually dealt with the fire and life safety. There were other issues that needed to be addressed in addition to,
Right. It could
in
have
addition to, thank you, in addition
So
to
it
the
is a
HPI.
little
So,
tricky.
yeah, so that we just need to be able to accommodate that appropriately, depending upon.
or it could be kind of a district choice thing. You sit on the unfunded list, you may get more money, but you choose to stay there because you don't want to have the stamp back up from DSA. No, well, nobody chooses, but if you've gone through DSA and you've got your stamp, you have no choice. It just happens right now.
The subtlety, though, would be DSA reviewing it under the new regs.
Yes.
Therefore, you would have to resubmit. And if you're making any changes on top of that that may affect structural or...
So, therefore, the advice is to not resubmit.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so, one, what we talked about is potentially a working group coming back next week to just, hammer out a couple more details, because, as much as OPSC and the working group did a fine job, and the staff has done an excellent job presenting this, I don't think the board is necessarily going to be happy with just OPSC's proposal.
Who would that be unlimited?
It would be our normal.
Open to anybody?
No, it'd be our normal working group as.
Same one that we had previously?
Except add Department of Finance. Yes. So, Dennis?
Regardless of whether you work out a deal with the working group next week or not, can you, I would ask that you bring the cash and the / CHIPS proposal at least, even if it's not in regulation form, just their proposal to the.
It will be in my packet to the board. I will ask the executive officer if she will include that or not, but as I hear directly from the IMP, and I hear for the most part almost consensus on bringing that forward, and then I will probably parse that and have my own recommendation at the same time. So best bet is to probably keep in contact with me and maybe get me information that I want to use.
And then I have one more comment that's a little bit off topic, but we have kind of alluded to the fact today that there have been increases in the requirements of the code, and we're going to have another increase in the requirement of the code as of the 1st of next year. And I would strongly recommend that the chair agendizes an increase in the topic of an increase in the grant to address those increases in the codes because they do cost money, and the grant should be increased accordingly.
And so we can tickle that in pending items as we develop it. So next month you will actually have a full pending items list, and we're hoping to have it like 3 months out so we can kind of get an idea of what we're doing and potentially have certain items that we can put in calendar. So kind of like with the AB 127 adjustment, maybe a discussion in August or September on certain things if there were to be changes, knowing that that's a January item. that could be a running issue, a running subject that we look at. So that's also something for my IMP members to look at. Look at certain items that may be yearly, that should be a discussion, because there are certain things that go to the board at a certain time, so that we make sure that we have our input. And then based off of direction from the state allocation board, we may be having to May IMP meetings. But I will, yes, Will? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to bring to your attention that there are also projects not only in the unfunded list, but they are under review by OPSC, and they actually, I believe, they do meet the new code. So I think that's something that need to be considered, and I think it would be penalizing these projects if they have to basically reapply again or have to go through the DSA process when there are 7 points that are added just basically. Very well known that these added points. So,
Well, and then that's where I suggest, as I am a staff of one, if you've got suggested language that would address that, or you have time to work with DSA, or I can try and find time to work with DSA and my staff of one time to address that, please send me suggested language, because that would be greatly appreciated. Any closing thoughts by OPSC?
I just wanted to thank everybody for their input, and especially DSA and Cash. We really appreciate everybody's help with this, and I think we all share a common goal, so I'm hoping that we can get there. Thank you.
Any parting thoughts? Thank you, everyone. I will keep you informed. I really appreciate the conversation today and the input by everybody. Thank you.